And now, you're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Good evening, everyone in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for RBLR Sports. I am here for the RBLR Rowdies show specifically, and I am going to talk to you about a couple of games that we had this past week and some interesting news at the RBLR Rowdies show. So, very quickly for our intro here, I just want to let everybody know what those games were. The Rowdies played to a 3-1 loss away to Memphis, unfortunately, on Wednesday, and then at home, a 3-2 loss versus San Diego Loyal. So obviously a pretty rough week, which we will get into. Eureka and I predicted a win and a loss versus Memphis, and then a win and a win versus San Diego, respectively. So I get 1 point for the game versus Memphis, and nobody gets any other points after that, unfortunately. That is updated, but we will move forward now and just get into the exciting news that we have got going on at RBLR Sports with the Rowdies show. I needed to get on a new co-host, as we talked about last week. Leo is going to come on when he can, but he is going to be very busy with his new job, and congratulations to him again for getting a very prestigious position. But to fill in for him here, we have Carlos Rueda. Carlos, how are you doing this week?
I am doing fantastic, Mr. James. Happy to be here. Happy to be talking to Rowdies. What's better than that? Talking soccer, talking Rowdies, literally the greatest thing in the world. Happy to be here. Happy to be joining you. So, we'll get into all those games you just talked about. And obviously coming in at a bit of a rough stretch. We'll get into all of that in a little bit.
Yeah, it is a bit of a rough stretch, but before we talk about the Rowdies specifically, Carlos, if you could tell us about your background in soccer and specifically with the Rowdies. Obviously, I think there will be a fair few people who are familiar with you before we, even got into just having you on the show.
Yeah. So I've definitely grown up around the game of soccer. Some quick background about myself. I've been, involved in the Rowdies community since 2016. My first game was at I think it was a Suncoast Invitational preseason game against DC United. Went with my youth soccer team. I came in to be enamored by Ralph's Mob, by the culture of the club ever since. I've been a season ticket holder since 2017. And I've lived in Tampa my whole life, but now I'm up here in Washington, D.C. I go to Georgetown currently. I'm studying government and journalism. Obviously I still take the time to watch most Rowdies games on TV now that I'm away and make effort to get to, any generally travelable games in the area or up here in like the Northeast or whatnot. Now that I'm away from home. I went to both games at Loudoun last season, which was a great time because there was so few people there and I was just being obnoxiously loud and you could hear me on the broadcast. And then I was actually up in New York a couple weekends ago for the Red Bulls game, which you and Eureka talked about last week. That was a great time. I was up there with my girlfriend. She's from New York City. Obviously I had to recommend that weekend to go up to New York as the Rowdies were playing. So, naturally. Happy to be here. Happy to be joining. Going to talk Rowdies and hoping to bring a fresh fan's perspective and opinion. But I am by no means an expert on the game. But happy to just be here as the average fan. Happy to talk Rowdies.
Well, that's perfectly fair. I was, a youth soccer player similar to you. I didn't play after the high school level, so there's not really any more expertise, I think, on this side. It's just, as you said, two fans, and that's the perspective that we'll offer. We will offer, what tactics we can get and anything that we can, delve into a little bit deeper than that. But mostly it is about being enthusiastic and presenting, what we want to see from this team as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's now get into these games because I guess we have done enough stalling from a bad week to cover here. But we'll do a quick review of the Memphis game and the San Diego game. So I'll take Memphis here. and we will go into the starting 11. Rico Rosarena continued on in net, and he went from the start. Aaron Guillen, Connor Antley, and Lawrence Wyke were the defenders in front of him, with Leo Fernandez, Lewis Hilton, Jan Ekra, and Dayon Harris in front of them. And up top, Jake Arman was more in a central number 10 role, although obviously he did drift around, and Steven Dos Santos and Sebastian Gwenzotti were up top. So this game got off to a very quick start with a goal in the first 30 seconds. And unfortunately, it was the Rowdies giving that up as opposed to scoring it. But we did equalize very quickly. It was, I believe, in the 4th minute after that we equalized off of a very nice goal from Lewis Hilton. And then the Rowdies were able to push Memphis in the second half, but unfortunately, we went down to 10 men and ended up giving up a second goal after Memphis had gone up just before halftime. So that's the way that it finished, with a 3-1 loss. And I think the injury to Lewis Hilton after he had scored and that red card to Steven Dos Santos really sucked the air out of the game for the Rowdies. And that was the way that it went. Carlos, can you tell us about how the San Diego game went?
Yes, sir. Jumping from one tough loss to another, let's hop into the San Diego game here. Rico Rosarena, again in goal. I believe that makes it 5 straight games in goal for him. Then we have a changed up back line with Jordan Scarlett, Timmy Mel, and Aaron Guillen. Antley and Wyke were pushed up from the back line to the midfield, joined by Etu and Leo Fernandez. And up top, switched up slightly the attack by including Kyle Gregg and Jake LaCava into the starting 11. And just like the last game, just like Memphis, the Rowdies were down early. Not as early as Memphis, but definitely early. 19 minutes in, Nick Moon scored the opening goal for San Diego. 1-0 lead for San Diego. Jake LaCava quickly answered for the Rowdies, storming down the field on a great individual effort. A solid left foot strike to quickly give the Rowdies the equalizer. It was up and down after that, very back and forth. But in the 41st minute, Sebastian Gwenzotti would score the go-ahead goal with a beautiful little scissor kick off a couple deflections on a corner. So after that, again, pretty back and forth, but it wasn't until the 75th minute that another goal was scored. And of course, it had to be the ex-Rowdy, Jack Blake, that scored the equalizer on his former team. Kudos to him for not celebrating too much. We love the respect from him. Great player, and we wish him nothing but the best. But, of course, tough to see him score against his old club. And after that, 15 minutes left in the game, back and forth. And it wasn't until the 88th minute that last goal would be scored. And unfortunately, it was not for the Rowdies. Evan Conway would score the game winner in the 88th minute. Really tough game, really tough, back end goal to lose that and let at least the 1 point slip away from us. Tough game. Definitely got behind early on possession. Couldn't control the ball. San Diego, by most statistics, seemed to outplay us. Tough game all around. And we'll get into all of the analysis and our questions around those games in a little bit.
Yeah, I think that, this was a whole week, I should say, to forget. It's been actually a month to forget. I am reminded of last year, I believe it was July, that was the really rough patch in our season. But I think that this actually might top that because we turned out a couple of more wins last year in that stretch. So, maybe this will be the corner that we need to turn here. But let's just get into the game here against Memphis. And the first half of the game really kind of set the stage for what happened. And I think that the Rowdies actually did well. What did you see, Carlos, in the first half against Memphis?
Yeah, that game, like you touched on, quick word to sum it up, definitely chaotic. That's not to say the Rowdies didn't play poorly. Like you touched on, they definitely had some good moments. Obviously, the highlight reel was that screamer from Lewis Hilton in the 4th minute to equalize that game. Crazy that there was 2 goals scored in a span of 3 minutes. By the 4th minute, it was 1-1. So definitely an action-packed game. And it seems like the Rowdies generally have not been just built for that recently. There's been some high-scoring games these past 2 games. 3-2, 3-1. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I'm going to say something very obvious here, but it's hard to win a game when you let in 3 goals. Getting on the back foot early is never going to help you. I mean, Hilton did a great job to bring us back early. And we created those chances in the first half. But I think the one that really just kind of knocked the morale out of us was that Derek Dodson goal in the 47th minute in stoppage time of the first half. Never a good thing to let in a goal right before halftime. And especially in a game like this where, you know, it was 1-1, 5 minutes in. It's back and forth. Both teams have a chance. We just got unlucky, you know, slip of play in the end of the first half. Little mistake, gave Derek Dodson some space. And of course, I said this on Twitter. Of course, it was the Georgetown alum, a guy I saw play for our soccer team up here, my freshman year. So I mean,
was that the championship winning team?
Yeah, he was on that national championship winning team, Derek Dodson.
Yeah.
So, you know, happy to see him doing well, but once again, he comes back to haunt the Rowdies. I don't know if you remember this from last season. Quick side note. He actually scored on us when he was on loan to Hartford last season in the game that Hartford beat us 1-0 in St. Pete. So that's 2 times now that we faced Derek Dodson, 2 times that he's come to bite us in the butt, unfortunately. Obviously, you know how the rest of that game went. Yeah, there was good moments. It's just a couple mistakes and a couple lapses in judgment that really just set us behind early and did not set a good tempo for the rest of the game, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had in mind, actually, this is something that the announcers pointed out, but that was apparently Memphis's fastest goal in their club history. They are not, you know, a particularly old team, but of course, you know, under 30 seconds, that is still going to be an early goal under, you know, most team circumstances. So they get their fastest goal record. Congrats, I suppose, whatever. But I hadn't even turned off the closed captioning on my broadcast yet. So I actually missed them scoring because I was fiddling around with the remote. But yeah, it was pretty frustrating to see how that happened. I did, as you said, you know, Lewis Hilton's goal after that was a stunner, and I thought that, you know, that was a much better omen for the rest of the game. But then I think that him going down had a very big impact because obviously people have to switch things up, and you know, from there the substitutions were not really able to help us out, and especially when Steven Dos Santos went out. Now, I do want to say, you know, we're going into the second half 2-1 down, and Steven Dos Santos does get sent off for what I thought was a questionable foul. I think that Neil Collins also felt, you know, we've had some trouble with, let's say, negative refereeing calls in the last couple of games here. But
Sure.
That did not help us, certainly. And I think that we were still building some momentum in the second half, despite being down a man. It just seemed to me that, you know, Memphis eventually were able to take advantage of the fact that we had 10 men on the field and we were pushing all of them up to score the equalizing goal.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And so we will move on to the next question here with Steven Dos Santos and Lewis Hilton. Obviously, and I think that, you know, help us out in the end. But you also have to take into consideration a couple of other factors that are going on here. For one thing, Memphis is more used to playing on a field that was, as Neil Collins and then the announcer described, as of a postage stamp. And, you know, I noticed when they got onto the baseball ring portion of the field that had been covered over with some maybe just some sod. I don't know if you would even call that, you know, turf, but it looked like players were mostly trying to avoid that part of the field.
Yeah. No, that plays a huge factor. I mean, you've seen it in the past. Before Louisville had their new stadium, which is a beautiful stadium, they were playing at, you know, another minor league ballpark. With the baseball, you know, the diamond's still out there. You have the clay, the sand out there and whatnot. And that takes a toll on the players. I mean, especially, you know, it's still being a baseball field that's being used as a baseball field. You really have to make a narrower field. And that's hard for players of away teams to go in and really, you know, assert their play style in there on a field that just is not built for it. and the Rowdies are used to playing on a big wide pitch out in Al Lang. They have, that asset that you can play wide, that they just couldn't really establish too well in Memphis. So of course that's a big factor. And as you mentioned, the Lewis Hilton injury early on really did mess up the tempo. I mean, I think Neil brought in Etu as the replacement. And I mean, frankly, they're just different types of players. Hilton is that guy that you want to push the ball up to create those chances. Etu, he's had his moments, but he's really not built for that same type of play style. So that definitely did take a toll on the team. Some of those other factors, they're just out of the control of the team. So yeah, I mean, a couple of things didn't go their way. The Rowdies obviously need to play a little bit better, but there's some stuff that are just, out of the control of the team that did play into that result for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when we're kind of switching up to the positioning was a 4-2-3, it seemed to me when we had gone down a man, it seemed like our pressing up top was really not getting anything. We weren't achieving anything from that. But it didn't also seem like Memphis were all that interested in, trying to go and push the game forward themselves. It looked like they were pretty fine with just sitting back and waiting for us to kind of give them the opening that they needed. And ultimately, that is what they took in the 85th minute, a minute that will come back to haunt us again. I wish that we had done a little bit better ahead of time and, had at least – not let's say just for 1 second, the second goal that we gave up, I thought that was also kind of off of a weak foul. It's one thing when you give up a set piece goal, that's a little difficult to determine whether or not that's something that can be fixed, because when you are defending a set piece goal, everybody just has to stick with their man pretty much, and as long as you don't lose them, hopefully you'll get up there. But every so often somebody's just going to beat you to a header. That's the nature of the game. If we don't give up the set piece in the first place, that is where I would say we should probably have done better, because I think that White gets called for pretty much a non-foul, but you also don't want to put yourself in that position where the referee could give it to you if they're, somebody that just isn't having a great day themselves. Sure,
for sure. Totally agree with that. I mean, you just really have to stay out of those positions. You really hate to concede goals like that because they're just so avoidable. So, I mean, like I said earlier, that's probably the worst time in the game to concede a goal, especially in a game that's like as back and forth as this. In a game where both teams are in it, stuff like that's avoidable. So, I mean, like you touched on, sucks to see it happen. Sucks to see it play out in favor of the other team, in favor of Memphis in this case. But these things happen. So hopefully we learn our lesson and learn how to bounce back in a little bit. In 2 weeks, May 15th.
Yeah, exactly. That will come in handy later, I think, having that big long break. But let's move on to the next game here, because there are some questions that we need to get into for San Diego as well. And I think that, the Rowdies are currently facing a couple of key injuries. So Lewis Hilton obviously went off. We were just touching on that. Sebastian Dalgard has not been in the lineup for the last couple of games. And if anybody was at the game against San Diego, it was actually the case that he was up in the stands. I noticed him up there, and I didn't want to, go up and bother him during the game. But I was like, oh, Sebastian Dalgard, that's up sitting up in the stands with his, I'm assuming his girlfriend or his wife. But yeah, it was interesting to see him up there. And then obviously the one other player that I'll mention is Robert Castellanos, who was injured within the first couple, let's say 20 minutes of the first half in our very first game against Birmingham Legion.
Brutal.
And it was not good timing, obviously. So with those three now being out together, Sebastian Dalgard apparently is expected back in 2 to 3 weeks. We do not have any update at this moment on Lewis Hilton or Robert Castellanos. It seems like, there's something to be said about the size of this roster. Is it, is this something that we can point to at this point of the season and say, maybe this needed a bit more tinkering?
Yeah. No, I think for sure you can look at it at this point in the season and be like, I don't want to say it's a problem. I think that's a very strong word, but it's a factor. I mean, you can see it playing out in the lineups of the last 2 games. I mean, we had Wyke and Antley playing on the back line against Memphis, and then you had them playing in the midfield against San Diego. I mean, this constant rotation. I mean, they're players that are built for it, Antley and Wyke. I mean, they can play both positions, but if you keep rotating them around, you keep moving them, it's hard for them to set like a in-game feel fully for either position. And obviously, we haven't really found the answer for what the proper back line is, because we let in 3 goals either way. We let in 3 goals against Memphis with that, was it Guillen, Wyke, Antley back line. And then we let in 3 goals against San Diego with the more traditional, Jordan Scarlett, Timmy Mel, Aaron Guillen back line as well. That's not to say it's either of their fault, individually, either of those back lines' fault and like as a collective back line. But there is something to be said about the depth of the team right now, especially on that back line. It's not a great situation when you're rotating midfielders into the back line and then having them play in the midfield the very next game. That's exhausting, and it's just not a great recipe for success, unfortunately.
No, you're totally right with that. And I think that one of the things that we need to look at, Forrest Lasso obviously was an extremely important player. And I think the Rowdies, they had not mentioned anything through the postseason, and we were waiting to get into the preseason. And Forrest Lasso ended up joining a club in Sweden, but it seemed like it was very late in the preseason anyway. So, barring any information from the club, it might have just been the case that, he was coming into preseason as far as they expected, and then, it was a late move. I'm not entirely sure what the situation was there, because that's not the kind of stuff, I guess, that gets covered with, the transfer news at this level of the game. But with them probably expecting to have Forrest Lasso up until the preseason, maybe they weren't entirely sure that they were ready to fill that spot when he was actually gone. Robert Castellanos, obviously coming in on loan, seemed to be the case. They were looking to fill him or fill that role with somebody who was MLS quality, hence the loan. Of course, he gets injured. So if that's the case, then you still have to fill the spot. And Connor Antley has done well there, but I'm just not sure that we lose. When we put Connor Antley at the back, we obviously lose his ability on the right wing, and I do value him there too. So it's kind of just figuring out what among the players that we have available to us gives us the best lineup at the back. And as you said, they did give up 3 goals with 2 different lineups there. So Carlos, what do you think is the best setup? It's very difficult for me to try and pinpoint at this time.
No, for sure. It's a tough question. I mean, like you said, the Castellanos injury is just, it's such bad luck. It really is. He's a great defender, and it really sucks to see him out this season, or presumably. We haven't really heard word about when he's coming back or if he's coming back. He was a great pickup. So I think, based on what we have, that Scarlett, Mel, Guillen back line is going to be the best we can do. Timmy Mel, I mean, he's not Robert Castellanos was frankly, a better fit for the position. But Timmy Mel plays that position, and I think you have to take advantage of that while you can, that you at least have somebody who can play the position, and hold out. There's some questions being asked of, our goalie situation. People are throwing around, the questions about why Ryko continues to be in goal over these past few games. A lot of people like Cochran better, or see him as, the better fit for the position right now. It could be a mix of that. I mean, it really is hard to establish chemistry between a goalie and his back line. And frankly, that's just something we don't have as we did last year. Evan Loro and that back line was just incredible. It really was a sight to see. I mean, they had that incredible shutout streak. Loro was just a great communicator. And I think that's something that we're just lacking right now with Ryko. That probably plays a role into the 3 goals we let in. So, independent of the goalie situation, I personally feel like that Scarlett, Mel, Guillen back line is going to be our best answer. take that, with a grain of salt. This is my fans' perspective, like we touched on. But I just personally feel like that's going to be our way forward. And, something interesting to note, too, I want to notice this because I'm looking at the lineup from the San Diego game. And something interesting to point out here is that one of the, I believe he plays for, Florida Premier. Going back to the Villages Open Cup game, we had those two local youth soccer players come up and play. And one of them, Santiago Castaneda, was actually on the bench for that San Diego game. I believe he slotted in at that back line for the Villages and opened for that game against the Villages. So, again, it's not a great sign. He's a great player, but again, it's a youth team player. He's still a kid. And the fact that he's on the bench right now against San Diego really kind of just is the epitome of that backline depth problem right now.
Right.
It really is troubling to see. But frankly, that's all we have right now, Scarlett and Elgia. Like we touched on, Wyke and Antley can play back there, but they do more in the midfield, and we need them in the midfield. So something to keep an eye on for the rest of the season. It's troubling, but it's what we have to work with right now. So hopefully they can take that break and use that to recover and build some chemistry again and figure that out for sure. We need to figure out that backline problem.
Yeah, chemistry is missing. That was something that we had in spades last year because that back line had just played together so many games by the time that we got to, the stretch part of the season. But hopefully we can build that up. And I think that the ability to actually take some time and just, not have a game and then recover and a game and a recover session, I think that that'll help because that was something that Neil Collins mentioned in the post-game press conference, either against Memphis or San Diego. I don't remember specifically, but he said that their schedule recently has been effectively, they play a game, they take a day, they recover. They play a game, they take a day, they recover. And, that's just very difficult to get anything going if you are playing with, that much of a schedule buildup. And I hope that this will allow them to actually work on the stuff that Neil Collins did mention that they need to work on, which is something that we're going to get to a little bit more because let's talk about the San Diego game here. Now, the Rowdies gave up the first game or the first goal again in this game. And, that is just, it seems to be a recent MO for us. And it obviously is not helping. What happened beforehand that led up to this? Is there something, Carlos, that you're seeing where the Rowdies are just not playing a specific way that they were previously? This is something that Leo and I had talked about last year when the Rowdies gave up a couple of goals in, early game that, we also scored a couple, but mostly that was not the way that it went. We were, a team that worked our way into the game and then kind of went from there. I hope that is not, continuing to be such an issue here.
Yeah. It's something we've seen over the last two games, really. I wouldn't say it's, I guess last 4 if you count the Open Cup. Oh, man. Okay, so let's, ignoring the Open Cup game, individual of the league, or apart from the league, if we're just looking at USL games, that's now 3 games where you've conceded first, including that game against New York Red Bulls too, which, with all respect to the Red Bulls organization, like that is not really a team that we should even be tying to. And to be giving up a goal that early, or not that early, but it was right before halftime again. Another halftime unlucky goal, a free kick, whatnot, avoidable goal. To be giving up avoidable chances like that against a team that we realistically should be winning against it's really tough. What the problem is there, it's hard to really pinpoint because it's not like they've necessarily been playing bad to start those games against Red Bulls, Memphis, and San Diego. They're creating chances. It just feels like it's been taking a little longer for the intensity that we saw last season to kick in. Why that is, I don't know. We just see slow starts, and it seems like that urgency isn't kicking in until the other team scores. And again, that's not a winning recipe. I mean, you can't just wait for the other team to score to turn it up a notch. That's now, I mean, what? We're in that, winless stretch right now. And that's frankly just because we've been letting the other team start faster than us. With the exception of that Tulsa game, April 16th, we've been letting the other team start faster than us every game. And yeah, that's just something we need to fix. I mean, the boys just need to start quicker. How that happens, I don't know. It probably does have something to do with the fact that we've played 5 games in 2 weeks. It's a brutal schedule, no doubt. So the energy hasn't been there. And I think this break is going to help us to rebuild that intensity a little bit for sure, especially against a really good team like Phoenix, a team we really want to beat. So let's hope that break works in our favor.
Absolutely. But there is more to this game. And, obviously when we went into the halftime break, we were actually up 2-1. And then naturally, as everybody is aware, San Diego came back and they took the lead and ended up winning the game 3-2. So with all of that being said, I kind of had an issue going back here. When we were at the stadium watching the game, it's enough. You're kind of in fan mode, I would say. It's a little more difficult to try to break it down while you're watching it, and especially in real time. I'll be honest, the replays at the stadium are not always the best. You don't always get to see exactly what happened again, but when you do watch the replay of the game itself, and then you can pause it, rewind, XYZ, that is a much better avenue for me to figure out, what happened and actually how the Rowdies played. So that's when I wanted to see what happened in the second half here, what led to us giving up the goals and actually losing this game. It turns out when I watched it, Carlos, I felt more that instead of the Rowdies kind of, giving this game away, in terms of the defensive side, which, we'll get to the third goal. I think that was a lapse, but the game should not have even been in the position where San Diego were level 2-2. There were very good chances that the Rowdies just squandered. And I think that everybody will remember the chance that Kyle Gregg had a breakthrough, or a breakaway, I should say, through on net. And despite being one-on-one with the goalkeeper and having, all of the net to shoot at, he ultimately put it over. So that was a big problem. And then there was another one that I remember. There was a very good chance. I don't remember exactly who it was. I think it was Sebastian Gwenzotti, who got free and should have scored. There was, a very good opportunity to do so and put us back in the lead. I think it was 2-2 at that point. And both of these chances just went begging. Dayon Harris was the one who set up the second big chance because he was put up as the striker for Kyle Gregg, actually. And then he was kind of a target man, but he used his speed. And despite being a pretty, short guy, he was able to push their defenders off of the ball and send in, actually, it was Jake LaCava, I should say. But his pass was awkward and Jake LaCava was not able to get there and take a one-time shot like we needed to do in the instant. So both of those big chances went begging, and you kind of wonder what's going on there. So that was something that was also brought up with Neil Collins after the game, and he had some choice words here. He said that this season can pretty much be defined for us by missed chances, and I don't know about you, but that seems to me like that kind of sums up a lot of the games that we've been having here. It's not necessarily that we've even been playing poorly, but we have been poorly executing these big opportunities that we need to usually put in the back of the net if we want to win the game.
No, I agree for sure. I agree. Those have been two big themes. Like I said, the slow starts and the missed opportunities. I mean, like I touched on earlier, San Diego scored that first goal, and then you mentioned how we took the lead. But we had to wait till San Diego, kicks us in the butt to really start that rally, that energy that we need, that urgency that we need. But like you touched on, once that happened, we really started to create those chances. Dayon Harris has been an absolute menace on the wing. He's been playing really well. But we're getting there. We're getting to the other team's, half. We're getting to their goal, and we're just missing that finishing touch. Gwenzotti was in a really tough stretch recently. He hasn't had a goal in, I can't remember exactly how many games, but he'd been struggling. He's been, missing open opportunities. missing good chances. And luckily, one finally fell his way against San Diego with that really nice scissor kick that tied the game. Or no, that put us ahead by one. So it's good to see him break out of that stretch. I hope that kind of kickstarts some of that slump of not finishing chances. But that's a problem we need to work on for sure. Like I said, I was at that Red Bulls game up in Montclair in New Jersey, and that game too, defined by a lot of missed opportunities. I mean, that's how Red Bulls was able to pull out a tie against us. We were hammering away. I mean, some questionable calls from the refs, but again, this isn't a team that we should be, tying against. Those missed opportunities are coming back to haunt us now. I think in the past, last season, we were able to get away with it a lot more because that defense was so solid, because Evan Laura was so solid back there. But there is something to be said about this, shaky back line, shaky goalie situation in conjunction with the missed opportunities. If you let in 3 goals and you're not finishing your opportunities, you're not going to win games. And we've seen that play out over the past few games, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. So those are all big things that we need to work on, or, maybe over the course of this little break that they have in play, they can work on the execution. That was something that I talked about with Connor Antley in the post-game press conference too. He said that, I asked actually both Neil and Connor, is this maybe a psychological thing that we're getting all of these chances and it's kind of the case that, we're not executing them, and maybe players are thinking, there are all of these games that we're doing all of these, we're creating all of these chances, but we're not doing the things to actually put the ball in the back of the net at the end of it. So maybe there's something, as I said in the press conference, a monkey on their back, and is that potentially a problem? Connor Antley had mentioned that, they do need to execute these. It's something where you just need to be able to, and his quote was, slow the game down and do it properly in your head before you execute with your foot, obviously. And maybe there's a bit of a problem there with everything, but that might also come down to fatigue too. So, there are all sorts of factors going on right now. I think that definitely the biggest thing, the most important thing right now is us getting this break. Carlos, you had a note here, 5 games in 2 weeks. That's a marathon. And as you said, and with all of the problems that we noted with injuries and the suspension to Steven Dos Santos before, it's a godsend that we had this time off, frankly.
No, for sure. I mean, we need this break. Luckily, the boys have a good 2 weeks. That's incredible of off time. I mean, obviously they're going to be practicing, but there's not going to be a game that they have to travel to or a game they have to play at home. Luckily, they'll have that time to recover, recuperate, and fix those backline issues, especially. I mean, like we touched on, that depth in the backline is going to be a problem, especially when these stretches of 3, 4, 5 games in a short amount of time come up. Our roster right now is not built for that. So in these situations, you got to take what you can. Scrap out ties when you can. Unfortunately, we haven't even been able, to do that against Memphis and San Diego. But now, we have this time before the game in Phoenix, a big game. I believe it'll be nationally televised. I think that one's on ESPN 2, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
Yeah. So there's going to be an opportunity there to rally and turn the season, or turn this little stretch around into something positive. I mean, like we said, Phoenix is not, the team that you really want to be playing coming off this tough stretch, coming off the break. But I mean, they've had their own struggles. I believe they lost 3-0 a couple days ago or yesterday to LA Galaxy 2. So they're having their own issues. They're having their own struggles, their own little bad stretch. But we know they're a great team. And just like we know they're a great team, we know the Rowdies are a great team. So the Rowdies have the talent for this. They have the talent in the midfield and the attack. That back line is going to be something to keep an eye on. But I think that, that defense and the goalie chemistry is going to be something that we can really work on building over this next couple week stretch ahead of that game in Phoenix. So desperately needed by the team, desperately needed by the back line. And we'll see how it plays out on May 15th, I believe. I believe that's right. Yeah, May 15th. So hopefully it plays out in the Rowdies' favor for sure.
Yeah, I think one other thing to note before we move on to our man of the match is also with you mentioned in the chemistry between the back line and the goalkeeper. Rico Rosarena has had a game against San Diego. So, yeah, there is a lot of talk online about, what is our best goalkeeper in this scenario when we have Rico Rosarena and then CJ Cochran on loan for at least this one season. We'll see if OKC Energy are able to come back. And frankly, I hope they can, because that is just, better for American soccer overall. But when we have CJ Cochran here, maybe he needs to get the same look, I suppose, coming up in the next couple of games or the next couple of days as to whether or not he can step in for those games that we will ultimately have coming up here. It was not something that you want to see. I think that Rico Rosarena has the potential to become a fan favorite. He obviously has a brother who is a fan favorite around here. And in addition to that, Eureka and I were talking last week about how he's a very flamboyant goalkeeper. He has, a lot of head turning saves, and he's very fun to watch. But that was not fun at all. That was very bad to see. So let's figure that one out too, and then we'll hopefully be able to build from there. So, Carlos, let's do our last question here. It's the same thing that we do after a game, regardless of the result, be it win, draw, or loss. Who was your man of the match for the game against Memphis, and who was your man of the match for the game against San Diego?
That Memphis game is really hard to pick a man of the match for. Unfortunately, not for the reasons you'd like to see. Right. I reference Thought Mob for some inspiration. And if you look on there, they have Hilton as the Rowdies' man of the match for obvious reasons, even though he came out in the 38th minute. So I'm going to agree with them. It's really hard for me to pick somebody else. It was just a really ugly game all around. We really struggled to get something going after Derek Dodson scored that stoppage time 2-1 goal right before halftime. So I want to take Hilton and give him a shout out for that incredible goal. I think that free kick on its own deserves a man of the match. Sports Center top 10 material, just an absolute banger. And really the only reason that we, kept going and stayed alive in that game. Immediately responded when we really could have, thrown our arms up and given up after we conceded in the first minute. So I want to give Hilton that man of the match for just an absolute banger of a goal. And for the San Diego match, I want to take Sebastian Gwenzotti as my man of the match. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm a little biased towards goal scorers. But Gwenzotti really needed that goal after that slump, and he managed to put on an absolute, stunner with that scissor kick in what was a really complicated situation. And he was creating chances. He was helping create those chances that, could have put the game away.
Oh, yeah.
But unfortunately did not go our way. So, yes, Lewis Hilton and Sebastian Gwenzotti, my men of each match, respectively.
Yeah, I like those picks. For the game against Memphis, like you said, I did reference Fatmob, and they had him up there. But one thing that I wanted to build out, when he went out, obviously that was important to the way that we lined up against Memphis and then also against San Diego. Against San Diego, we gave up a ton of possession. And while possession doesn't necessarily turn into wins by any means, there have been plenty of teams that didn't win the possession against the Rowdies, but still beat or drew us in the last month or so. But you could still see that he was a very important factor because he wasn't out there and we weren't able to play the way that we usually like to play. But with all of that being said, him only playing 30 minutes there, I wanted to see who was able to step into a role where they, assumed a lot more responsibility because Lewis Hilton was out. And for me, that was Connor Antley. Connor Antley did a lot in the game against Memphis where he was trying to change things up and, actually get things going, make sure that we still have some impact in this game, even if ultimately it all was futile. So Connor Antley won it for me for Memphis. And I agree with you entirely. for the game against San Diego. Sebastian Gwenzotti was very, good in terms of the things that he did out of the 6-yard box, and then the one thing that he did in the 6-yard box that was absolutely stunning. It's so complicated to get your body into the position to do what he did, and to also execute the kick at the same time that you're doing the little half flip with your legs. And he did it absolutely beautifully. It was wonderful to see. We will get back to Sebastian Gwenzotti and the goal that he scored a little bit later in this episode, because it is something worth mentioning again. But yes, I did very much like that goal, and I think that he made the whole Rowdies fan base stand up and actually salute some great play there from him. But that will do it for our man of the match segment. And Carlos, I will turn it over to you to do the standings update here for where we are in the league.
Yes. So the Rowdies are currently just in playoff position right now. Again, very early in the season, and they have the most games played out of any team in the Eastern Conference. Some really wacky scheduling on the part of the league. Those 5. I mean, obviously one of them was Open Cup, but 4 games in 2 weeks is really just something that some of these other teams have not had to deal with. Birmingham is right behind. So we have 13 points in 7th place. Birmingham Legion right behind us in 8th place with 11 points. But they have those 2 games in hand. We are currently behind Louisville City, who sits in 1st place with 21 points. Detroit City, who is putting on a bit of a show in the league in their first year in the USL, 2nd place. Pittsburgh in 3rd place, Indy 11 in 4th. The Miami FC in 5th place, and those Memphis 901 Rascals that knocked us off over there in Memphis, right ahead of us in 6th place on, they're tied with us on points, but they have those 3 extra games in hand. So not a great situation, not a great spot to be in, sitting in 7th place with the most games played. But like we touched on, I mean, that takes a toll, having all those games in such a quick stretch. So plenty of season, plenty of games to get back into it, plenty of time to make up ground. So going over to the Western Conference, you have Colorado Springs Switchbacks in 1st place with 21 points. San Antonio hot on their tail, tied with points and on goal differential with 21 points. Right behind them, San Diego Loyal, who knocked us off at home, in 3rd place, 19 points. Just behind them, you have Phoenix Rising, who will be going out to sea in just a couple of weeks. They have a game in hand on San Diego, but they are down by 4 points. They have 15 points. And in 5th place, the Las Vegas Lights, kind of resurrecting themselves after what was really a just dismal last season. So it's good to see them putting on a bit of a show, sitting up there in 5th place early on. Plenty of season to catch up on, plenty of games to make up ground for all teams, especially for our beloved Rowdies. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll see how that game in Phoenix plays out. Like I said, no games this week, so there'll be a bit of a break while some teams likely will hop over us on the table or make up a little bit more of a gap with those games in hand. So we'll have to see how it all plays out next week. And we have some time to make up ground. So let's hope some of those games go our way. Some of those results this weekend go our way as well. Help us out a little bit. Let's not make the gap too big between us and 1st place.
Yeah, I would definitely like that. But we will do our one more thing segment now, and then we will get you listeners out of here. So obviously liking and subscribing to our show is free. But if you think you might need some new clothes coming up for a hot summer that we are probably in for, guessing based on how hot it has been just in April, You can help us out at the podcast by heading over to shop.rblrsports.com and checking out all of the designs that we have got going over there. Our producer, Eureka, has got a lot of cool stuff, and he's also working on stuff all the time. I do know that about Eureka. He is always trying to get new things going for the shop as well as the podcast. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff on there that I have found. Like I said, last week I got my dad actually a Rowdy shirt so that he can represent RBLR while he's out and at the games as well. Please, if you would like to do so, check it out and use the promo code COYR for 10% off. Obviously, everyone loves a discount. I want to re-mention Sebastian Gwenzotti here. He did score that goal, and he now has 1 goal to tie the record and 2 to overtake it. So he is sitting on 59, and Georgi Christov, the record goal scorer currently, or I guess not currently, but overall has had 60 for the Rowdies. Like I said, if he gets 2, then he will become the record leader. And I saw somebody out there with a cardboard record that he was breaking over and over after Sebastian Gwenzotti's goal. So that was really cool to see. People are hyped for that, and I am including myself. I'm assuming you, Carlos, are also very hyped to see Sebastian Gwenzotti do that and actually become the record goal scorer for the Tampa Bay Rowdies. He's obviously a legend. He's done an incredible job the last 3 or so seasons for us. I think that it would be just so cool to see him do it, and hopefully live in person would be really neat. But if he does it against Phoenix, I will also not be too upset if that leads to us winning.
For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, Georgi Christov, one of my favorite players of all time for the Rowdies. Like I said, definitely biased to the goal scorers, but yeah, just an absolute great man, and a definite legend of the team, legend of the club, and really part of the Rowdies lore and the culture around the team. And Sebastian Gwenzotti has been, just as great of a legend for this club. Really lays his heart out on the field every game. And he's just somebody that the fans love to see. So it's somebody you really want to see break that record and be forever ingrained in Rowdies history. He's already on that Rowdies, 100 appearances wall in the stadium. We'd love to see him get some more recognition for his hard work. And like you said, hopefully in person. Not that I would probably be there. I'm still wrapping up my semester up here in DC. Well, actually, maybe by the time semester's over, I'll be back. So it'd be great to see him do that in person. But, a win in Phoenix would be lovely. And it would be great to see him break that record on national TV too. So
very good point. Very good point. I would love that. That would be super cool. I think that the commentators would definitely note that for everybody watching. So, the Rowdies do not have a game this week, as you said, and we will have to wait for the game against Phoenix, not this week, but next week on Sunday. And like you said, it will be televised on regular ESPN. Actually, I believe ESPN2, I should say. But regardless, it would be very cool for Sebastian Gwenzotti to take that platform and set himself and the Rowdies a new record. And we will have to just wait until then to see how it goes. So for everybody here at RBLR Sports and myself, Carlos, we are going to sign off now. If you could, please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If anybody would like to get in contact with you, where can they reach you?
Of course, follow me on my cesspool of a Twitter account at CarlosTPA10. You can find just my terrible takes on all things Rowdy soccer, on all things soccer in general, posting all sorts of things. Tweet a lot about my beloved Liga de Quito team back where my family's from in Ecuador. So maybe expose yourself to some new leagues, some new teams, some new soccer. That's where you'll find all my terrible takes. So come hang out, come join me, give me a follow, CarlosTPA10. Love to interact with everybody. So James, take it away.
Well, I visited Quito when I was in Ecuador as a preteen to go on this Galapagos tour that my grandmother took me on. So I'll have to get some of your takes about the actual team. I wasn't following soccer as closely then. Now I need to see, what team I actually visited when I was in there, but when I was in the city. But if you'd like to get at me, I am also on Twitter. I am at RBLRJamesK. And you can reach us using the hashtag AskRBLR. Please also like and subscribe to our podcast if you have not. We are on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as YouTube and all other major podcast platforms. So for a bad week, but something that will lead us into a good break and into a good future. I am going to say, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.